A Quirkless Guide to Winning the UA Sports Festival. Written by Leahistyping. Read by Cole. Chapter 4. Is there ever an incorrect time to trauma dump? After departing from Shinzo and the others, Izuku anxiously followed behind the hero course student. He didn't know what he wanted to discuss with Izuku, but it couldn't be good. He just stole their glory, for God's sake. As they were walking out of the arena towards the private hallway, Izuku reflected on his time at Aldera. He had followed this routine so many times before that this felt normal again, as terrible as that was. Though bullies often followed behind him, opting to catch him by surprise, which they never did. That didn't mean he was prone to other tactics too. He presumed it was some sort of power play, but he was all too familiar with following behind some kid who was weaker than a low-tier criminal to eventually get beaten up. He had the skills to run away or even fight, but in some weird way, taking the beating was always less of a hassle. He didn't have to worry about pissing them off more. And if he was quiet enough, it only took a punch or two before they got bored and left. There was no use in fighting back, he noticed. The bullies would get their fill of satisfaction and then leave him alone for the rest of the week, plain and simple. But it had been a while since any of that happened. UA wasn't a place that bullies often resided in, and he quickly learned that his classmates weren't half bad, and not the bullies he used to experience on a regular basis. That didn't mean he befriended any of them, though. The entirety of his class just kinda left him alone, if that made sense. They let him do his things and he did the same in return. All except Shinzo. Of course, but Izuku considered him a special case because of how quickly they clicked. As the pair finally arrived at a secluded area, Izuku could feel his brain running on overdrive. This guy didn't seem like the type to beat up another student. And not just because he was a hero course student. There was something about him. The way his face seemed to always be in a state of neutrality made Izuku nervous, as it was difficult to tell what he was thinking. A hero course student wouldn't actually hurt him, right? There was no way a person who was training to save others would beat down some general studies kid just because he was angry. No, he had to think rationally here. He wasn't in middle school anymore. Nobody was going to hurt him. Izuku Midoriya, correct? The boy asked as he stood against the adjacent wall Izuku was situated near. For one of the first time in Izuku's life, he gulped at the confrontation. What? This guy was so scary and ominous, okay? Yeah, that's me. I'm pretty confused as to why you wanted to talk. Did you need something? Izuku replied, unsure as to where this conversation would lead. I think it's obvious why I brought you over here, the boy stated, leaving Izuku more confused. Did he think Izuku could read minds or something? You're Todoroki, right? Endeavor's kid. I don't get what kind of business you have with me. We're nothing alike. Izuku said, sounding more annoyed than he meant to be. Your team got first place in the cavalry battle, with a strategy that I assume you came up with. I'd say we have plenty of business. Todoroki answered expressionless, something Izuku took as part of his personality. And if this is some challenge or declaration, give it to Shinzo or Monoma. I'm not the guy you want here. I'm a nobody from general studies, whose plan went well, nothing more. I don't intend to win the finals anyway, Izuku explained, his eyebrows scrunching in a mixture of confusion and annoyance. Why did he even bring him here?
How did you do it so easily?
Todoroki asked.
Getting the headbands, I mean. I've never seen anybody push so much into a simple sports game.
Izuku was rendered speechless. He didn't know the answer, truth be told, or at least he didn't want to face it, not now. I enjoy bungee jumping, he decided to go with. Todoroki gave him a questioning glare, the most emotion he had displayed all day.
You don't seem like the type,
he said blankly,
but I have to know something.
What is it? Izuku asked, curious. This guy was pretty weird, and he had no idea where this was going.
Do you know that vigilante karma or something? That would explain your incredible mobility if you learned from someone like them.
Todoroki questioned. What? No, seriously? What the fuck? What? No, of course not. Why would you even suggest it? I've never met a vigilante in my life, Izuku exclaimed, his voice cracking faintly regardless of the attempts to keep it even. How was Todoroki so close yet so far off at the same time? Todoroki gave him another questioning glare, this one more visible than the last.
If you say so. It was just an observation.
I mean, I can see what you mean. Most people would have hesitated if they were in my shoes, so I can understand why you'd assume that about me. Izuku supplied.
So you don't want to be a hero, even with the skills you've displayed so far?
Todoroki asked, almost hesitantly. I learned a long time ago that I'd never make it as a hero, so the dreams just died out, Izuku disclosed. He had no idea why this boy was so easy to open up to, but he wasn't complaining.
I was raised to be a hero,
Todoroki stated. Oh?
Have you heard of quirk marriages?
Todoroki asked.
Izuku nodded. My father Endeavor and my mother were in a relationship on the sole purpose of creating powerful children. I grew up to resent my old man because he only saw me as some tool to complete his unfinished goals. I never used my left side in battle because I refused to be that person for him. I get what you mean about the dream dying out. For a long time I wanted to go against my father and be something else. But saving people, that was more important to me.
Todoroki revealed, and wow, Izuku was not expecting a trauma dump in the middle of the sports festival, but here he was. I'm really sorry for what you've been through, Todoroki, Izuku replied, but is there a reason you're telling me all of this?
If you truly want to be a hero, then fight for it. When we face off in matches, I want you to bring your all against me. Don't pull some cheap loss and give up immediately. It would be a disgrace to your character after what you accomplished in the cavalry battle,
Todoroki said, voice unwavering. Those words hit Izuku like a pound of bricks. No one besides Eraserhead had commented on his potential before, and though he was planning on just giving up on the finals, he felt like he owned it to Todoroki to win, to prove himself to everyone. And with Todoroki's declaration, something in Izuku clicked. A new urge to try and win against the almighty hero course overcame his previous resolve, and before he could think logically about it, he heard himself say, "I'll look forward to beating you." Todoroki replied with a smirk, and only a moment later he was gone. Izuku felt his stomach growl, as he had barely scraped enough together for breakfast this morning. Right, food. Izuku's mind had changed. He was going to fight to win.
Hey, Midoriya, over here!
Izuku heard Shinzo call as he left the food lineup. Glancing over his shoulder, Izuku spotted Shinzo and Hatsume sitting together at a small table. After arriving at the table, Izuku promptly placed his tray down and sat next to Shinzo. Looking around, he asked, "Where's Monoma?"
"He went to celebrate with his class, but he said he'd talk to us after the tournament,"
Shinzo explained after swallowing a mouthful of rice. "Oh, okay, that makes sense," Izuku said, now starting to dig into his dish. He really should start eating better. But healthy food was so expensive, and his only income other than his distant dad, which all money went towards tuition and rent, was through side jobs he picked up, and it's not like those are enough to pay for healthy meals and... "So, Midoriya," Hatsume said, snapping the boy out of his train of thoughts, "where'd you run off to with 10 million? You were gone for half of lunch and missed the lineup for the tournament." "Oh, I'm sorry for keeping you guys waiting, but we went to this hallway near the bathrooms. He tried to declare war on me for the finals and told me to bring my all," Izuku explained. Truth be told, he was still trying to wrap his head around it himself.
"But you're not even trying to win?" Shinzo asked with an eyebrow raising in confusion.
"That's what I told him. But if I'm being honest, I kinda want to win now. Not even to switch over to the hero course, because that's impossible anyway, but to be able to say that I did it, you know?" Izuku said almost hesitantly. He didn't want to make Shinzo feel like he was trying to steal the spot away. Shinzo deserved it more than anybody, honestly. But Izuku's worries disappeared when he saw a wild glint appear on his friend's face.
"Took you long enough to get warmed up? I was scared you were going to chicken out on me."
"Can't wait to see how you two boys are compete in the finals. It'll be interesting to watch." Hatsume laughed as she got up from her seat. "For now, though, I need to make sure my babies are prepared for my match. Bye!" Hatsume walked off towards the exit, leaving Izuku and Shinzo alone at the table. "So," Izuku started, "let's talk strategy."
"Let's hear what you got,"
Shinzo replied. If there was one word Shota could use to describe how he was feeling today, it would have to be anxious, which was peculiar because he rarely felt anxious. Today was different. He couldn't stop thinking about the events that transpired the night before. With Karma hunched on the ground and a grown man, a hero, raving about taking him to the police. The sight of a large purple bruise on the cheekbone of the vigilante's freckled face. Seeing his kid's face fall for the first time. Even if it was just one minuscule part of his cheek, it was something, and it proved that Karma trusted him enough to let him look. Though that wasn't the thing that was making him anxious. It was the injury itself that kept the hero up last night. It was a nasty bruise, covering a large part of the kid's cheek. It was honestly he was honestly surprised that he noticed the freckles the kid sported with how dark the bruise was. Karma was fortunate enough that the cheekbone didn't seem to be fractured, but Shota still felt on edge with having to wait until tonight to check on the injury again. Karma had been through worse, much worse, but no matter how big or small, Shota always seemed to fret over any wound the vigilante got. It was a young kid putting their life on the line every night. His kid, and he wanted him to be safe, regardless of how unrealistic that wish was. So Shota had to be there to support him, so that the vigilante wouldn't push him away. He had hated it because he wanted Karma's case to be over with, for him to be off the streets and practicing heroism safely, well, legally. Shota's leg tapped anxiously against the tiles of the staff room, of which he was currently hiding in. It was the lunch break for the sports festival, so he opted to use the precious time hidden away, hoping that he could spend his lunch undisturbed. If he could just get an hour of peace and quiet. The staff room door busted open before he could even finish his train of thought. And of course, the one behind the door was the only man who didn't know any better about disturbing Shota. Or maybe he just didn't care. His husband. His husband walked in a moment later, practically buzzing with enough excitement that Shota knew he would be leaving the room with a mild headache at least. Ah! Shota! There you are! I had a feeling you'd be hiding out in here, Hitsashi said as he walked further into the room.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to keep interactions to a minimum. I'm too exhausted for this. And I still can't believe you signed me up for the co-host spot.
Shota replied as he picked up his coffee mug that read, Cat Dad. What? Hitsashi got it for his birthday, okay? From the desk, and it was previously resting on. Oh, come on, Sho! You know, no one can rock that microphone like you can. Your commentary's been great so far, Hitsashi encouraged. Plus, we're in the finals now. It's about to get real exciting.
Calm down. I don't say I was going to quit,
Shota reassured as he took another sip from his still scorching coffee. Just how he liked it. Shota rolled his eyes when he witnessed a sigh of relief come from his husband. He wasn't planning on quitting the job, even if he didn't particularly enjoy it. But it was fun to watch his husband stress over it.
Speaking of, he added, what are your thoughts about the final 16?
Shota asked. Honestly, Todoroki or Bakugo probably have it in the bag this year, but I'm so proud of how far my two kids got, Hitsashi said as he took a seat next to his husband, his nose scrunching at the smell of pure black coffee. Hitsashi had always been more of a tea drinker.
Shinso and Midoriya correct. I must admit that I found them quite intriguing. I've never seen that kind of strategy during a cavalry battle before,
Shota commented. Shota was beyond impressed about their skills, but it being a pure example of what training and practice did for someone. But even still, something felt off. He couldn't place his finger on what made his mind reel with confusion. How they specifically, the green one, Midoriya, carried himself and his team. It was something so indescribable yet familiar that at once that Shota could all at once that Shota couldn't directly pinpoint what it was. The way he jumped from his team, or even just how he ran, had Shota's mind running full time to try to make a connection, and all that did was leave him with a bigger headache than before. So, great. Yes! Hitsashi exclaimed. I knew they were serious about winning, but their performance had me on edge for my seat!
Wow, you underestimate your students that much, Shota asked teasingly.
You know what I mean! His husband scoffed, slapping his shoulder and almost spilling the coffee that was still warming his hands. Shota sent him a glare in retaliation. Speaking of your kids, how's your listener? Hitsashi asked.
You mean Karma?
Shota replied, almost exasperated. So you do think he's your kid? The blonde exclaimed, his voice an octave higher than usual due to excitement.
Yeah, whatever. And he'd be better if he wasn't constantly in trouble. He's seriously going to get injured beyond healing if he continues at his pace. No kid should be doing full-time patrols while balancing school.
Shota sighed. This kid was definitely the reason for his newly grown grey hairs. Huh? Still no progress, huh? Hitsashi replied, previous excitement dulling a little.
Well, not exactly. I saw part of his face last night, so that's something new.
Shota said, taking another sip of his coffee. You what? Hitsashi yelled, shaking Shota like the explanation would fall in his lap if he shook him hard enough. The motion swished some coffee along the side of his mug, almost spilling it onto his lap.
Jesus, Hitsashi, watch it,
Shota reprimanded.
But yes, I did. Blackjack, a rookie underground pro, thought it was a rational idea to try and to take Karma in. Said I was going soft or something idiotic like that. And then the kid tried to flee. He ran into Blackjack's quirk. I'm still surprised he let me see the injury. Even if it was a minuscule part of his face, I still take it as progress regardless.
Shota explained as his husband listened intently. If there was one thing that got the hero to shut up, it was Karma. That's incredible news, Sho! I'm so sure he'll open up to you fully at any day now, Hitsashi said. Shota smiled grimly.
Speaking of, Midoriya actually reminds.
Before Shota could finish, the speakers that littered the building came to life with Midnight's voice, filling them a second later. The finals will begin shortly. Everyone, please make your way back to the stadium.
I'll tell you after.
Shota sighed as he drowned the rest of his coffee in a swift motion. After placing the now empty mug on the desk, he followed Hitsashi out of the door and back towards the commentary booth. He had a long afternoon ahead of him. Round 1. Match 1. Momoyao Yokozu vs. Eiichiro Kigishima. Match 2. Izuku Midoriya vs. Nieto Monoma. Match 3. Shoto Todoroki vs. Hanta Zero. Match 4. Tenya Ida vs. Mei Hatsume. Match 5. Setsuna Tokage vs. Bakugo Katsuki. Match 6. Yanagi Reiko vs. Ashido Mina. Match 7. Shiosaki Ibara vs. Kaminari Denki. Match 8. Shinzo Hitoshi vs. Kendo Itsuka. After learning the lineup from the first round, Izuku chose to skip right to strategizing against Kirishima and Yaoyorozu. It's not that he didn't think Monoma was talented, it's just he didn't really stand a chance. Izuku was quirkless, so his quirk wouldn't work on him, and as far as Izuku knew, Monoma didn't know about his status. He kind of felt bad for the guy deep down, but what else was he supposed to do? They were destined to a quirkless fist fight, and unless Monoma was holding back from him, then Izuku had it in the bag. He wished that it wasn't the case for Monoma's sake, but he was sure that the future hero would have plenty of coverage in the coming years. So with that in mind, he let his fight with Monoma rest on the back burner whilst he created other plans. Besting 2 1A students, especially one that got in through recommendations, was going to be a difficult feat to accomplish. Kirishima's quirk allowed him to turn his entire body rock hard, while Yaoyorozu was able to create anything from her body. Izuku didn't know the limits to either of their powers, so it was difficult to estimate how well versed they were in their quirk use, which really only left one thing for him to do right now: observe. Though it was technically his time to rest in the waiting room before his fight, he just had to know more about them to strategize. So after both students entered the gravelled field, he took the opportunity to hide out in the tunnels leading to the arena. Nobody had technically said he wasn't allowed to do it, but the thought of doing something that might get him in trouble was anxiety-inducing. Ironic given his pastimes. From where he was located, he had the perfect view of the battle that was on its way to commencing, and he was suddenly feeling grateful that he remembered his notebook. There was so much to write about! Yaoyorozu had the brains to outwit almost any opponent she came across, while Kirishima seemed like the type to just go for it without much of a plan. Izuku could use both of those to his advantage given the proper time to strategize. Though right now, he was curious as to who would take the first win. Displaying weaknesses and flaws in one's fighting style was standard for 15 years old trying to become a hero, so Izuku expected them to basically hand him the information. All right, everybody! We're in the finals for the season's first years! The last event will pit students against each other in a tournament-style fight. Win by knocking your opponent out of the ring, immobilize them, or make them surrender. Quirk use is encouraged, and don't be afraid to play dirty, so bring pain! But remember, you're training to become future pro heroes, so keep that heroic attitude and don't try to kill your opponents! President Mike explained, voice sounding more excited than it was before lunch, if that was even possible. Now, let's get started, shall we? Our first match is Yaoyorozu, a student who got in through recommendations of the hero course. She's up against Kirishima, whose body's the perfect balance between shield and sword of the hero course. President Mike introduced, and Izuku couldn't resist the urge to snort at his teacher's enthusiasm. A second later, the horn blows and Kirishima is off in a flash. He charges towards Yaoyorozu while hardening his skin, and his voice is just loud enough for Izuku to hear him say, "Let's end this quickly!" It seems as though Izuku was correct in his analysis, and that Kirishima was the type to completely rush into things when he presumed he had a high chance of winning. He only displayed that trait in the obstacle course, but this match only solidified Izuku's thesis. Yorozu in turn created a shield, which probably wasn't her best idea. Kirishima would just smash through it and the round would be over. She must have some other plan at play, Izuku thought. Right after he thought it, it clicked, as Kirishima lunged at the shield, his hardened arm clashing back and forth against Yaoyorozu's apparently unbreakable shield. Yaoyorozu was trying to create something on her forearm that was pushing against the back of her shield. Each powerful strike now against now dented metal brought Yaoyorozu closer to the border of the ring. She was about to 7 hits away until her feet would be past the bolded lines. And like that, she'd be done. Uh-oh! Looks like Yaoyorozu is on the defense while the unbreakable Kirishima attacks her at full force. Is this it for her, or will she pull ahead when all hope seems lost? Present Mike narrated as the duo became closer and closer to the borders. Kirishima who was focusing on forcing his opponent out of bounds, didn't seem to notice his classmate's ulterior plans. The sparkles that indicated her quirk was at use shined behind the large metal, hiding it from view from her opponent. 7 hits turned to 6, and 6 into 5. Izuku couldn't tell what Yaoyorozu was trying to make, her creation time probably slowing when overwhelmed. Something Izuku could use against her if she faced off against him. It formed at the pace akin to a snail, and even Izuku was feeling on edge of his seat if he was sitting on one. With only 2 hits remaining until Yaoyorozu would inevitably be out of bounds, the sparkling stopped, and either indicating that she accepted fate and gave up, or that the creation was complete. Another punch. As Kirishima lifts his arm to go in for the finishing blow, Izuku notices Yaoyorozu whip something towards his calf, successfully wrapping it around the hardened skin. A moment later, she pulls with her remaining strength she has, and Kirishima tumbles backwards, flying onto his back. The horn sounds signaling the match's conclusion. Izuku looks down to the ground where Kirishima is lying and notices what Yaoyorozu's plan was. Kirishima's foot is outside the bounds. Yaoyorozu's only a millimeter away. Some sort of cloth lies on the ground, still wrapped around Kirishima's now softening leg. Izuku wasn't sure if that was her plan all along, but by the look of disappointment on her face, he assumed it was a last-minute ordeal. Yaoyorozu is the winner of the first match! Midnight cheered. Both are huffing frantically, and when Yaoyorozu seems to have gotten a clear head, she extends a hand out to where Kirishima is still lying on the floor. When he notices the invitation, he accepts and races back onto his feet. They share a knowing glance, with Kirishima giving a full-teeth smile and shaking her hand firmly. Soon after, they both leave the field, the crowd cheering Yaoyorozu's name as she walks off. Whoa! Looks like Yaoyorozu had a plan after all. Those were some killer moves she pulled at the end. Can't wait to see what she does in the next round! Present Mike exclaimed. Too busy scribbling down observations and strategies in his notebook, Izuku doesn't notice when Yaoyorozu starts to approach him. He lifts his head up from the book of notes when he hears her footsteps, and out of panic he says, "Good job out there, Yaoyorozu." Thank you, Midoriya." "Thank you, Midoriya." She smiles grimly, obviously unsatisfied with her win. Izuku would have to look into that later. He doesn't have a chance to respond, though, because a moment later, Izuku hears a familiar voice of his homeroom teacher.
"All right, everybody! Match 2 is about to begin! Now introducing Izuku Midoriya and Nieto Monoma!"
Now, that was quite the thing, wasn't it, my dear ladies and gentlemen and my non-binary lads? Let's just say there's only one chapter remaining of the Karma series for now. Maybe there'll be a sequel after that. Let's hope there will be. But for now, it's bye-bye.